Hello, welcome to Staring Down the Storm, Autism, Advocacy in America. I'm your host, Advocacy. All right, welcome back, everybody. We have a really interesting guest today. I'm going to let her introduce herself. Go ahead.
Oh, give me too much credit. Interesting.
No, I think you're interesting.
Okay, yeah, my name's Mary Pat Torbeck. Yep.
All right, Mary Pat, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Oh, grew up in northern Indiana, one of 6 children. Went to IU.
Okay.
Married my husband after college. We met actually at an IU football game.
No kidding.
Yeah, and then didn't start having our children until he was relocated in Atlanta. All 4 children were born down there. And then after our second child, our last child was diagnosed with autism too. I think we realized that maybe being closer to family could be a good thing.
Okay.
So we came back to Indiana in 97.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when was your first child diagnosed with autism?
Oh, 36 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, he was born in 88 and he was diagnosed in 89. Clark also had cardiac defect, began having seizures at 11 months, and had been diagnosed as developmentally delayed. So, we were already in, children, getting therapy services and so forth. So everything was delayed, his speech. But what got me was that he was my second child. So at my first child, he lacked the eye contact, the certain things, and not just his physical development, but I saw other things.
So your first child was a female child then?
First child, yep.
Okay.
First was a girl, yep. And then our son came along, our first son. And then I think we talked about this a minute ago, but it's interesting to consider that back then, that the statistic, and we did have the benefit of Emory University was down there, Eggleston Children's Hospital, and at that time Emory had a autism treatment center, and that was terrific because just nationally through our country there wasn't an awful lot. The statistic at the time I was given was 1 in 30,000 births resulted in a diagnosis of autism. Anyway, so...
And that was in 1989.
Yeah, 1989, yeah. So think of how that's changed.
I know.
Just a little bit. But, we were fortunate to be in a city that had access to a lot of services. And so he had therapy, all kinds of therapy services and whatnot. And then we had another daughter who was neurotypical and healthy, and then our last child, our son, who is now 30. It was interesting. His presented very differently, which is the case frequently. Very typical development up until the age of about 10 months, and we started noticing a little bit of a shift. So he too was diagnosed before the age of 1, or just at about a year of age. So, yeah.
I'd say that's actually astonishing for that time, for the late 80s, early 90s, that you were able to be in that position, to have that kind of access and to get a diagnosis that quickly, because people still are struggling with getting a diagnosis early.
I hear that. I hear that a lot. And I don't know, they were hesitant back then. The ironic thing is, and I don't necessarily think it's ironic, I think it was divine. But in college I worked at a camp, and it was called Camp Millhouse. I don't think that's not the name any longer, but it's in St. Joe County where I grew up. And I worked there as an aquatic director and taught swim lessons. And it was all for children with disabilities. And there was a variety of disabilities. I mean, physical, cognitive, all kinds. But I had a young girl in my cabin, and there was another boy that was at camp at the same time, and they both had this thing called autism. And I'd never heard of it. But when I started noticing some little stimulatory behaviors in my boys, especially my first son, I thought, I've seen that before. And that was when this child so I was asking my doctors if it was autism. I did. But they said, we don't want to be too premature.
That's interesting that you even had that terminology. How things just piece together in the right way that you happen to have the word for it to ask.
It's true. And I think that benefited... I think it benefited me personally because I had been thinking about it long before I articulated it. Before I said anything, I was thinking, this seems familiar to me, but I didn't know much about it. I mean, I just worked with these children at the camp as a teenager, you know, for a couple of weeks and they'd go home. So I didn't really understand any long-term impact. I just knew that when I was working with them, they had these particular unique behaviors and yeah, so it was
I think that's interesting that you say right around 10 months because with my first child, I think I noticed some things. I wasn't really sure what it was because it was my first child, right? And I didn't really have a good comparison, even though I had nieces and nephews and I was around other kids. But I think there's something different when it's yours, when it's your child and it's your first one. And I spoke 2 languages, so I was trying to teach my child 2 languages.
Oh, gosh.
So when he wasn't necessarily hitting his milestones, I just kind of put it off to, you know, sometimes kids that are learning multiple languages, they take longer, so that's normal. And he did have some language regression. But the more and more that I get into this, the more stories I hear and the more deeply I get into the community, I think he was presenting signs very early on. And it's really interesting because I have a friend of mine that she used to run a daycare whenever she, you know, not sure how many years ago, but when her kids were growing up. So, you know, 80s, 90s time. And I won't say too much about her because I don't want to, you know, infringe upon the friendship relationship and things that she's told me. But she had some experience with kids that had different types of disabilities. And so I took my son to visit her during COVID because we had a period of time that, you know, people weren't traveling. I was off work and I was like, I don't want to just sit here. And I thought, well, that goes a little bit with my personality though, as we've talked about. And I'm like, I'm not sitting here. I'll take my mask with me. I know how to take care of this kid. Right. So I drove to Arkansas to see her. And we had some talks about Kai. And
my husband's phone.
No, it's fine. Don't worry about it. But she mentioned some things in a nice, soft way that didn't seem abrasive to me. And I'm glad that she did it the way that she did it because I probably would not have listened. I'm not quite sure how much I took in, to be completely honest, but it did stick with me. And I think it was an entry point into curiosity of, okay, maybe, like, I love this person. I think a lot of her. I have a lot of respect for her. She's not coming at me in an aggressive way. She's showing me that she cares. So something about this I need to pay attention to.
And that's a true friend.
Yeah. But I just find it really interesting that you said 10 months because I think right about that time, I also was like, I probably wasn't to the point where I was ready to accept, oh, hey, I want to, you know, take him to get all this testing. Yeah. But I was starting to notice some things that might be different.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that, you know, when you're seeing the specialist and you have a child that's been now deemed, okay, perhaps we've got a developmental difference here. Let's take a closer look. One of the first things I noticed of our son, he was a big child. He was 10'2" when he was born. So he's a big guy. He's still a big guy. He was 6'2" and, you know, big man. But we were concerned that he was just such a big guy. We thought, oh, he's going to be out of that crib before long. So we had dropped, and I had removed anything. This is back before they said you don't not have any kind of anything in the crib. So but I made sure there was nothing in the crib that he could grab or get a hold of. And so there was nothing there. It was just his little, you know, his blanket and his mattress. And I came in and I was getting his siblings up and moving around, and he was still asleep, or so I thought. And I heard him laughing hysterically, and he was just a little guy. I mean, he was not even a year old, right? And I go in there, and I can't see anything. There's nothing. I'm looking at where he's looking, trying to see if there's a shadow on the wall. And I always remembered that because it was a little unsettling because it seemed just very different. And interestingly, many years later, one of the doctors or specialists would ask me, did you ever suspect that your child ever had any kind of hallucinations? And I remember looking at my husband saying, I can't say no. I think that's very possible. And when he was very young is when we... So who knows? It could just be his little, you know, his demeanor. I have no idea. But then where we lived in Atlanta at the time, there was pine straw. instead of mulch down there, a lot of times they just use pine straw. And he'd never paid attention to it before, and suddenly he was fascinated with it and was picking it up and dropping it, picking it up. So some of the repetition, some of the things that you hear kind of classically that occur, and we started noticing that, and I thought, okay, yeah, but it was nice to be able to come back home. It was, to be around, just have family close by, you know, not that anybody can do any, you know, anything in particular, but it was nice to have the emotional support and be back around family.
So what was your experience when you came back to Indiana with services?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, and I have done all I can to give kudos to this company, because when we were relocating, I called the Indianapolis Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
Because I had no idea what kind of services were available here. And when I'd lived here before, I was a single person, or at least didn't have children.
Yep.
So you're paying attention to so many different things. I never thought about schools and specialists or anything like that. So I contacted them, and they were kind enough to direct me to, at the time, I believe the company was called About Special Kids. Oh, no, excuse me. It's that now. It was called IPEN. And they put me in contact, and I wish I could remember that woman's name because she was an angel. She ended up calling me in Atlanta, and, you know, I'm just telling her our story. And I said, I have these 4 lovely, beautiful children, and 2 that I know are going to need extra care, and I have no idea. So she walked me through the entire process.
Oh, wow.
And even had made me aware of something called a Medicaid waiver, which I'd never heard of before, didn't know anything about that. And she just said, I think it would be wise to get you on a wait list as soon as possible. So as soon as you have an address, you know, let us know. Well, I'd forgotten about it, you know, relocating with 4 children.
Sure, I can
imagine.
imagine.
It was a big deal. So I kind of forgot about it, and she called me. I mean,
No kidding.
Yes. So, I mean, again, to this day, I think I don't know what I would have done. And she talked me through the whole process. And it was almost 6 years before we ever, once we lived up in Indiana, before we had, our number came up, if you will, for the Medicaid waiver. And we were able to get some kind of, you know, services for the boys and some behavioral support and so forth. But it was all because of that woman. And I'm so grateful to her for that, because that was a wonderful thing to have that connection. This is, you know, the internet wasn't, you know, was not a thing back then. So, you know, in the 80s, you just didn't, you went to a library and looked it up, or you know, had talked to other families too.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, though, because I think that's really valuable information, because, you know, how were you connecting with the organizations that were here at that time?
Yeah.
Was it through this lady?
Initially, and then there was a woman, and she and I are still friends to this day. Her name,
kidding.
Yes, and maybe I shouldn't mention her name actually, but let's just say that she was the only other person I ever knew at that time, mind you. This is back in, now it's 1997, and we're getting ready to relocate. And she called me, and she had a neurotypical daughter and 2 sons that were both on the spectrum, and that both had, was not called the spectrum then, but but they also had complex diagnoses. What was it called back then?
I think that's important to say.
Well, for a while there, you know, they really were hesitant to say autism. It would be developmental delay, you know, things like that. But our sons had, they gave them the diagnosis of autism. But I think partly because we were so close to the Emory University Autism Research Center. That's what I think, after talking to other parents who came from other areas. I think maybe that was an advantage.
Yeah.
So that they got that diagnosis perhaps a little earlier, and they could, you know, cater the therapeutic interventions specifically maybe to help address some of the special needs that they might have. But yeah, so it was, we had town hall meeting. I shared that with one of you.
I would love for you to tell that story.
Oh, golly. Well, as many of you know, if you're a young mother and you find that your child has some, you know, some challenges. And since our son Clark had some medical challenges too, he had the seizures, he had a heart defect, and had cerebral palsy as well. So he was more complex. But there was a town hall meeting, is what they called it. It was actually held at a library, but it was trying to pull families together whose children had disabilities. It wasn't specifically autism, but it was disabilities. And we all met at this library, because that was how you kind of connected with each other. And I met several of the people at children's therapy centers, or in the waiting room of your doctor's office.
Yep.
You notice, so that that looks. I'm seeing some similar things there, and you talk to them. So it was much more that face-to-face, maybe casual connections, and we had a family at our church who also had some children that had different, neurotypically, they were not, neurotypical. Anyway, but at the time, I think as a young mom, a little overwhelmed, frightened, it's only human to kind of, you get really focused on, yourself, and overwhelmed and scared, and feeling like, why isn't there more I can do? I wanted, more. And this woman was probably the age I am now. And I remember thinking, it's an older lady, but she was so graceful. She listened to all of us mothers sharing, and she heard very compassionately, and she listened, and then she said, she was actually, I think, brought in to do just what she did, which is then come back and offer a different perspective. And so she shared with us that she understood everything we were going through, because she certainly did. And she said, but when my son was born, there was nothing. There was no school that would take him. There were no opportunities for in-home care. There were no day programs, or there just wasn't. It was the family or nothing.
Yeah.
And many children back then were, kind of, the doctors would even suggest you may want to think about institutionalization, which is a painful thing to think about, right, to any parent.
Sure.
But she was so kind, and she just shared with us, I hope you all know how fortunate you are to be raising your children today, because there's so much more available. And I've never forgotten it, because it was a humbling moment.
Yeah.
And it was good. It was good to be reminded.
Yeah.
It was good to be reminded. Yeah, so I'm so grateful for her. I could never remember her name, but I'll never forget her face, and the way she said it was so kind. It wasn't at all judgmental. She wasn't saying, oh, she truly understood, and she was truly grateful that a lot had changed. But it, that was, I can't imagine how much more challenging that had to be. And not having any help at all. Her child happened to be later diagnosed with autism, and so, had some behavioral challenges that were, difficult to manage, and but they made it through it, and so have we.
I think this is a very interesting conversation to have at this time, considering there are a lot of places right now that are considering doing just that, having conversations about bringing back institutionalization.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the reason why I brought you on. I know you were asking me at the beginning, like, why do you want me to come on as a guest? And I said, you have a lot of knowledge that I think would be very valuable right now. And the stories that you can tell people as a refresher to say, hey, listen, my kids were born at this time, but I was in the presence of people that did not have services.
Yeah.
And I think that's a valuable perspective to give to people, because even, some of us that are still struggling right now with some of the things that are going on, we still had it better. We still had access to more resources. Maybe we also had to fight hard to get them. But like you were saying, this lady is talking to you from a place of they weren't even there.
Yeah, yeah. And to your point on that, we all can go back and be grateful to the prior generation, because you're exactly right. It's, this generation, I did my, all of us do, right, as moms, advocate. It's that they call it the mama bear thing, but you do, whether it's in the school setting or, you're always looking for ways that your children can thrive. Not just survive, but thrive in this world, and finding as many opportunities as we can. I know we're all looking for that all the time, but it's a beautiful thing to be reminded of that when you look, because you can look back, and it just made me more grateful. It made me more grateful and more mindful that I may be frightened where I'm at. I have these, two special sons that I don't know. They're so different than my girls, but they have taught me and my husband and their sisters so much. And you and I when we first talked about this, and I did, because I was saying, yeah, I don't know what I could offer. I'm a mom. I just am, one of so many. But I will say, and I told you this, that as long as to give the positivity and remind everybody that, we learn the most when we're struggling. It's when you gain the most self-awareness, I think, and you find your strengths that you didn't know were even there. It's when you're on your knees.
Yeah.
And that, as hard as it is, because it is painful, and I mean, I have been in that position, curled in a ball, just sobbing my eyeballs out, thinking, how am I going to get through another day? Oh, I have. But my thing about it is that when you can look back, and hindsight's always, much more clear, I realized that if it weren't for all those struggles, if it wasn't for those hard times, I wouldn't have found the strength that I had within to carry on. I know I wouldn't have. And I also wouldn't have had my mind opened, my heart opened to learning so much more in this life, because I was just learning it from my perspective, the way I'm wired. So to be blessed with individuals in my world that are wired differently from me, that behave differently from me, I learned from them. They taught me things to see that I hadn't otherwise noticed, and so there's just a lot of joy and good that comes from it, and we gotta find ways to giggle, right? When the heart I know, because it's life. It's life, and life is. Nobody can avoid the challenges. And another thing, too, because we touched on this as well, but although our sons happen to have this diagnosis of autism, there are so many conditions that involve children, so many. Of course. And whether it's physical, illnesses, cancer, so many different types of physical disabilities, and so many, oh my goodness, genetic conditions and that impact. And you and I have talked about this a lot, but I think we're both here today to celebrate all the ways that we are the same, and the way that our differences can inspire and teach each of us. I've told you this, but I mean, we're a family of very strong faith, and I just feel like God went to an awful lot of trouble to make us all different, and there's a good reason for that. And I think if we can all be more, tolerant of our differences, that we'd have a little happier place.
Well, I said that you were interesting because as we talk, more and more things come out. And so when we're talking about family, maybe you'd like to share a little bit about your family unit, because as you got to talking, you said some things that I was a little surprised by, especially considering that you have a strong faith.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. Well, so we have, our family has been educated in a variety of ways. And that is the way my husband and I see it. We have been educated. We have had our hearts and our minds open to so many things we would never, you learn. I'm just going to digress for a second, but
no, of course.
We each grow up in our own little family nucleus, and if we're blessed to have an intact unit, that helps. But you start out with learning from your parents. So you kind of inherit, if you will, as a young child, their value system, their priorities, their religious beliefs, their culture of living, however they do that, their habits and so forth. And then as we get older and we get out on our own, life starts to really kick in, and you have your own individual experiences. And it's just been my personal experience that all those individual experiences have shaped and molded the already existing core of what I had. And one thing that has never wavered is my belief and faith in God. And that has just been my grounding, my grounding for life. It just always has been. So as we were raising our family and life was going on, we have these children who are different. We have been touched by mental health, circumstances. Our one son has multiple diagnoses, and some are mental health. We have a child that is gay. We have diversity. We have beautiful grandchildren with brown skin, because we have a fantastic son-in-law who is black. And so to learn from where all these different people and all these different experiences come, and what they have to offer and teach you when we sit around as a family and talk is amazing. It's amazing.
It's okay.
I am so grateful for it all, because all it has done is enhance my husband and I's compassion. You know, you try to be a good person, you know, hopefully we all do, but being exposed to these things that are different from my own personal experience has done nothing but strengthened my faith in God, my belief that we are all created in His image, and we're all unique, and we are here because we all have things to share with each other. And those uniquenesses are what make this life grand. I mean, it is. I would not want to be in a world where everybody was like me. I'm telling you, I would not want that. So we're so grateful for it, because I do really believe it has given us such an enhanced look at things. And I'm just grateful for every lesson. I'm grateful for them all. And we continue to be taught by and learn from. And so being exposed to those things is a good thing. It's a helpful thing. It reminds us all, it reminds us that we are all so much more similar than we are different. So, and I know you and I have touched on this, but it's a tragic thing to have so much intolerance of each other just because we're a little different in certain ways, when we are far more similar than we are different. And I just really wish we could get to a place where that's what's embraced, is the fact that we are all in this together. It is this one life that we all share, this one earth we all live on. And so, you know, it's that. And so I think that's where the perspective that we come from, our family, is just that, and embracing each other's differences, because they make us as a society of people better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I think that is an amazing viewpoint you have, and I hope that people listen to this episode and really feel that, because I know there's a lot of people in Indiana, especially of strong faith, that maybe struggle with the unknown and struggle with the different adversities that come into their life because they may not fit their society's version or their community's version, or, you know, maybe it's even their religious body's version of what should be appropriate. And yeah, I would agree with you. You know, there are multiple conversations that can be had about different religions, different faiths, and all that. But at the core of it, we're all human. We're more related than we are different.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
We're all a little bit different shades of hair or eyes or skin or whatnot. But we all put on our pants the same way. If we wear pants.
That's true. No, you're right. I know. It's been a grand ride. And the other thing I think you're talking about, it might not fit with their social, it might not even fit with that person's, what I want to say, maybe what they had envisioned or anticipated for themselves in life.
Sure.
And so to that, I just want to say, none of us should be afraid. Don't be afraid of when something that seems outside wait a minute, I didn't anticipate that. Well, what does that have to offer? What does that bring you? What are you learning from it? You know what I mean? And it's easier said than done. I know that. When you're in the midst of challenging times, challenging day, a rough day, where you feel like you're barely able to get your head above water, it's harder then. But I think cumulatively, if you don't fear the unknown, don't fear the unexpected. If we could look at it more as an opportunity to learn something from it, I think that it helps, because then we're bettering ourselves, and in doing so, that's just makes us a better friend, a better sibling, a better parent. I just think it's good. That's all. Yeah.
Well, now you know why you're on the podcast. See all this wisdom we're getting? She's like, I don't have anything to share. I was like, I beg to differ.
Well, it's just, I guess what I want to say to that is it's my own, I can only speak my own personal experience, right? And how we see it. And that is how it's been for us. That's how it is for me, is trying to find the joy in something, trying to find the good and trying to find the lesson. You know, what can I gain from it? How can I grow better? You know, focusing on our own personal growth a bit more than criticizing another person's, perhaps.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about your boys.
Yeah.
And I think that would be really helpful for people, because for those that have young children right now that are walking through, I know we've discussed many things off camera, but just give them a little bit more insight into your life and some of the decisions that you guys made to accommodate your sons with vacations, with traveling, all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I guess in the early days, it was, you know, you're all hungry for any kind of therapeutic modality or anything that might help. Give them the best chance. Our boys happen to both be, you know, severely impacted by their autism, so neither of them have speech.
Okay.
Even though they had years of speech therapy, and we tried, oh golly, everything there was out there, right? All the different electronic devices that facilitated communication. We did auditory training with our son Clark when we were in Atlanta, because that was something back then. And this one is interesting. Back in the late 80s, the Lavas method was more West Coast. And so what I was exposed to was something they called the Greenspan method. And this is a doctor that, you know, taught you to get on the floor with your child, make eye contact, and connect. And so when I was being told the different kind of methods that were out there, that connected or resonated with me. I thought, I just want that. I can't project where they're going to be. I have faith that it will go the way it is meant to be, and I hopefully to learn from that. But I did want to connect with my son. And my firstborn was the one that didn't have much eye contact. So I will have to say we learned to be quite gregarious and animated in all of our, you know, engaging with him to try to get him to look at us, you know. And then when he'd do something crazy, like all of a sudden he'd throw himself on the floor and look up at the window, and he'd be looking outside on a rainy day. And so we'd do that with him. And you'd see the raindrops coming right at you, like an IMAX experience. Oh, yeah. And I remember just crying and grabbing his hand and saying, "Oh my goodness, thank you. That is so cool." And I would not have done that. I see the rain falling, but I would never have thought, I'm going to lay on my back real close to the window and look up the window. So when all those things started to kind of come together, again, that cumulative effect, I started to recognize more and more, oh my gosh, they have so much to teach me. This is amazing. I did hope, I'm not going to lie, we both hoped that they could eventually learn to have speech and gain other skills to become, you know, I guess what we consider as truly independent, you know, not that I think none of us are truly independent, if you ask me. We're all dependent on one another, and you know, I am to God, but it was, that was a great start, was figuring out, okay, that speaks to me, even if some other ones were considered more popular at the time, or I just felt comfortable in my heart. I just remember thinking, I'm not going to do good with holding something to get him to do something different. I'm not going to be good at that. I'd be better off just try to just connect with my child and see where it goes from there. So that was helpful. But, you know, they didn't have quite as much, you know. They had physical, occupational, and speech therapy. So we did that for years. Moved up to Indiana and got our youngest in First Steps. And you know, we all know the school systems. That's an interesting ride. But truth be told, I feel for them. It's challenging to try to accommodate so many different learning styles, because we just spoke to how very different we all are in so many different ways, but we are all much more similar. So, but to try to touch on those little differences, so many children have different learning styles. You know I'm a visual learner. Many people say, "Oh no, I learn by, well, I have to watch it, or hear it or read it." So we all learn differently. So it's a hard job, but our sons were both in life skills classrooms. It seemed to serve their needs best, since they wouldn't necessarily be on a reading or, you know, so it was more learning individual life skills. And
did you find that effective for your kids?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I'm not going to lie. I was not the best in the early days in those IEPs. And so I have no idea whoever's going to see this, but if it's any of my teachers, I'm really sorry it took me so long to get there. But the IEP would begin, and we all understand the reasons for them, right?
Yeah.
You kind of list the strengths and the weaknesses, and I would inevitably cry every time because I wanted to focus on all their strengths. And yet the weaknesses were the ones that they were, how can we best, help that and help that and help that. But when they would say to me, what do you want, Mom and Dad? What do you want? And it was always, I want them to be respected. I want them to be loved. I want them to be seen for who they are, beautiful human beings who have much to offer this world. They may offer it in a different way, but I, walking alongside them for all these years, have learned they have plenty to offer this world. And I see so many faces soften when they see our boys behaving differently. And I think some of that today is the great gift of the fact that so many more people are aware. I think that, or at least we're finally talking about mental health problems. We're talking about kinds of developmental differences and neurodiversities. And so at least these conversations are getting had. And because they're getting had, and they're getting had in public forums, more and more people are aware. Whereas, honestly, decades ago, not so many people were.
Yeah.
And so the judging and the looks could be a lot more harsh, I think, than they are today. I just think there's a lot more people out there who have been exposed to it, too, and are more understanding. So that's lovely.
Well, I do also think, though, there is that camp of people that I'm noticing. I mean, we have to have this conversation because I don't think that there would be a national conversation of reinstitutionalization if there weren't those people that would wish to not be in the presence of these types of individuals.
I know. I know what you're talking about. And I really have no idea why this has become such a problem. I really don't. I know that as individual humans, we're all complex, right? We're complex creatures. But the mental health thing is really something to me because there just must be some kind of acute care for people who are having acute episodes because, many mental illnesses are chronic. I mean, they're long-term. And so, sometimes medications become no longer effective. And so a person's going through a period of time where just, a more acute and intensive help could be the pivotal thing to change their trajectory. So I don't know I don't know the answer to that. I sure wished I did. But we're in a critical place for that because of our homelessnessness.
I was just going to say that. It doesn't really do us much good if we can't meet people's basic needs because, neither one of us are doctors, but we're human beings and we've had life experiences. And I'm seeing a lot more unhoused than I would like to see. And how is it that we can really have someone handle their mental health issues if they don't feel safe? If someone's living out on the street or something like that, even if you move them to a farm or something and then you are forcing medication on them, that's not going to make them feel safe. And then that's a whole other ballgame. So I'm seeing some overlap with things like this type of mentality of we don't want them in front of us. We don't want to see it. We don't necessarily want to provide them the necessities that they need to be better, to be able to be more functional in society. We just want to push them to the side. And so if we can't do away with them altogether, I know that's horrible to say, but this is just where my brain's going with it. If we can't do away with them permanently, then let's just have this far-flung area that we put all of them, and then we will force them to behave in the way that we want them to, and we will be the ones to decide if we will allow them back into society. And that's the sort of stuff that makes me nervous for my children, because, we all have an expiration date, and I'm, the type of things that I'm doing right now, I'm trying to see into the future where, what will my children and all of these children's lives be like when our generation of parents are gone? So that's going to take work. And if we're already going backward, to a time before.
Yeah.
Like we've already advanced. We should be going further forward, don't you think?
Yeah. Well, for sure. But I will say this, and again, not a doctor, and certainly not a sociologist where I have studied this. Again, this is just one person's experience.
Of course.
The different types of mental illnesses that, and I'm talking about my family, my extended family,
Sure.
siblings included, having nieces and nephews, and who struggle, and just my personal experience. It appears for the type of mental illnesses that some of the folks I love have had, the mental illness that they struggle with, it's complex in that when they are in the midst of their crisis, they are completely appear to be unaware that there is anything going on with them, and so it makes it harder to help them.
Sure.
And that because what we're seeing as help is to keep them safe, to keep them, and possibly to get them to professionals who are hopefully, in a position to help them. But it's that part. I think that critical time is what's really hard. Is when people get into acute cycles and they are no longer aware that it's them, and it is challenging. I will have to say, you are out there more than I am. I'm just me, my little world. But I guess I'm more hopeful than that. I don't think we're going to go back to the old days. I think it's a matter of finding new solutions, because clearly just dispersing everybody and saying, okay, we're opening up these doors to Central State, here in Indiana, and just everybody, good luck. And that, I believe, has been recognized as not being effective. That's not effective. There has to be a gap. You've got to fill in some gaps. There are clearly times when individuals, so I don't know what it's going to be, but I do hope that it will be something more like perhaps a temporary acute care treatment facilities. That will be more of those, so that when individuals are having acute episodes, they can get back to be regulated, whether it's through cognitive, therapy, or if it's medication. But it's complicated, and it's complicated too when you have individuals, like our youngest is dual diagnosis, which so many are, and that can complicate, the road when they aren't able to cooperate in the cognitive dialogue, so it's tricky.
Well, I think all of us could probably at least agree that we have problems with access, we have problems with housing, we have problems with mental health, and just starting to have those conversations, starting to build community support to be able to have a larger conversation to say, okay, listen, like, these are problems that we have in our community that need solutions, and the bigger the conversations get, the more people they, kind of like the type of things we do. I met you at a function with other autism moms, and now we're doing this. The more type of things we do like this, you come across people that have interesting ideas, and then the people that have interesting ideas finding ways to fund them and say, okay, you know what? We don't know if it'll work, but let's try that. Right. Let's try it. Let's see what happens.
Right. Because we need multiple solutions.
Yeah.
There isn't going to be just one pretty clean solution, because it's more complicated than that, I think.
Well, and I think there are people, gifted people, right, that they enjoy serving. They enjoy working with these people, and not everyone is made to do it.
Yes.
And so for those people that actually enjoy being around people that are struggling with different things, if they have an idea, give them money to do it. Yeah. Because they clearly care. They care about the community. They want to make things better. Yeah, I agree. I do. Yeah, I'm with you though. I'm not so far down the rabbit hole that I'm very, very negative about it. But being a single parent, it's just something that's in the background. Sure. I mean, none of us know when our expiration date is. No, so true. And I mean, you could actually talk about that a little bit. We were speaking about that earlier. Yes. Because we've all been there. Yeah, with it, long-term planning for your sons.
Yes, and we did start that way early. But that is just out of fear. I mean, and I am telling you, don't be afraid. Well, but there is that fine line between, living in the moment,
yes,
but preparing for the future at the same time. And so that's what we were doing. And the truth of the matter is, we also didn't want to, our sweet daughters have always, they love their brothers and they're amazing. They're amazing. But we didn't want them to be, if something happened to us, had it, fall all on them. And so, we did. We started looking at it, and that was, it's gotten better. It's getting better. But it's got, we've got a long way to go still. And it's funny how we all do it, I'm sure. But you think, we know we're not going to live forever.
Sure.
But you hope you can care for your children forever. And until things happen to prove you different. Health problems. For some people, it's financial. For others, and then for those who have individuals that they love with all their being, have those behavioral challenges. That becomes a safety problem. So there's so many more things that can play into it. And
would you feel comfortable speaking a little bit more about your experiences, just for people that are watching that have kids with autism, for example, that maybe they're young and they have behaviors now? Just to kind of, I think some of the things you shared with me off camera might be valuable, but only speak about what you're comfortable with, obviously.
No, okay. So, well, again, with our older son, it was we were almost more concerned about him medically all the time.
Okay.
He was a little more medically fragile, developed pneumonia a lot.
Okay.
And he needed open heart surgery when he, in 98, here at Riley. We were only here for a year. So he had that done, and that thank God that turned out all right, and he's doing well. His cerebral palsy is very manageable. He has never really been treated for that. It was just, you try to stretch and keep him mobile and so forth. But the seizure disorder was concerning, choking risk. So for him, it was more a set of, medical concerns. And then, of course, always for individuals like them, you don't want them to ever be, when you're not having eyes on. If he's in a safe room like his bedroom, or in a room in our house that I knew he was fine, but you always, it's the safety. So I think sometimes, as mothers of kids who are special in this way, you're on all the time. I mean, I think as moms, you are anyway, but you really have to be high alert. And I don't know that I fully appreciated the toll that can take. So we were talking when we first came. I used to always get up extra early in the morning. I'm a morning person, so it was easier. So that I would have maybe a couple of hours, and maybe it was completely dark outside, but that gave me time to collect my thoughts, say my morning prayers, ask for strength, and be prepared to start a new day. That helped me enormously. Our younger son, as sweet, and I mean to tell you, he is such a love. He had a lot of stuff, a lot of behaviors. I mean, biting, hair pulling, self-abuse for a very brief time. We were glad that, and then we really did. We had one particular year that my husband and I often talk about as being tragically probably one of our darkest with him. Just the crying, crying. He was so sad, and we'll never fully understand. I mean, maybe heaven can give us a glimpse into what those moments were like. I don't know. But it was heartbreaking to us because we'd rather have him hitting us than crying. Because we couldn't get, and it was around that time that we began medication. And he was young, and it was terrible. And I say it's terrible because who wants to give a young child medication? But we were genuinely concerned. And I do not share this story to be in any way shed a negative light on the hospital, but it was an interesting moment. So our son Brian had been crying like this for, we really guessed about 70% of the day he was in some form of crying. And when he was awake, obviously. And it was just so overwhelming. And we had already connected with, the doctors here in town, and they were autism specialists. And So it was a weekend, and I decided to call their emergency line. I was so concerned. And unfortunately, the response at that time was, well, do you think are you afraid he will take his life? And I remember thinking, he's 3.5 or 4. I said, I'm pretty sure he doesn't have a concept on that, but we're gravely concerned about his state of mind, about what's going on with him. And we just wanted, to get, so we ended up just having to take him to the hospital because we really couldn't get, and at the time they gave him something. Now maybe it was Ativan, to be honest with you. I can't even remember what it was, but something to just calm him down because his heart was racing. And anyway, it was about then that we kind of started pharmacologically trying to help him to where he could feel better and not be sad. But his stuff was hard, and his behaviors were hard. We used to laugh calling him a Tasmanian devil because, sound familiar? Because it was, oh golly. And then as he grew, and he was a big guy, a husky fella, a lot of holes in the walls. A lot of broken things. So we learned to never have any pretties on our table. Never put anything out that you're going to be upset about if it gets broken. Golly. And it was really hard on our girls, to be honest with you, because they loved their brothers, and although their older brother never harmed them physically, and Brian never meant to, ever. But they may be holding him or in close proximity or, swimming with him, and so that they're very close, and he could just reach over and just bite your face or pull your hair, and he'd get hair and pull it out of there, pull it right out of the roots, and would go on these like little rages, and we didn't know what triggered it. I don't know that he did, but it was, but God love him. He'd cry then afterward. He hated it, especially if he'd see a bruise or that he'd cut you or something had happened like that. And, that's hard. And for all of you out there too, who have, your other children, and we're so grateful for when you need to have help in your home so that you can, sit down with your other child and help them with homework or do other things, to have young teenage girls having strangers, in their home, you can, it creates some challenges for them. And so when you and I first talked about this, that was something I did tell you I would like to talk on a little bit, which is that, when any of us have when our children had chronic illnesses or chronic conditions, it affects the entire family, the entire family. It affects marriages. It affects the other siblings. It affects the health of all those involved because it is stressful. And when you care and you love, you want to make it right, and it's hard. And so we talked about the modalities and the therapeutic assistance and the in-home help that we can have today is wonderful. But you have to recognize that, and we speak about this about the Medicaid waiver cuts. You're helping an entire family of people, not just one person. An entire family, because by helping that one individual, everybody gains, and it's that's a powerful thing to have recognized, and I know we sure did. It affects everybody, and it affects you because you care. Everybody cares, and so that's another massive benefit to the individual assistance that the person who has these challenges receives. Maybe you just provide some respite for the couple so that they can stay together, and because they have time to talk. They have time to talk things through, because I know, and I'm sure many people out there are the same way. You have a rough day, and you might want to speak about it, but sometimes at the end you're so emotionally exhausted, you just fall into bed and go to sleep. And those conversations sometimes don't get had. And it's helpful if you can have them. And honestly, I don't think we even had an opportunity to have in-depth conversations with our girls until they were older. And we've told them that is something we feel so sad about, because, every child has their growing pains and little things that maybe happen to them. And you'd like to be able to give that kind of, attention to a child when they need it. And sometimes you can't. And there's a lot of different reasons that you can't. But anyway, sorry, I'm babbling.
No. That's what we're here for.
It affects the whole family.
We're here to have this conversation.
The whole family.
So I agree with everything you're saying. I think it's interesting, though, because I think people are in this mindset right now because of some things that were said by some people in high places. That whole old thought of these children or these adults are a burden. How can we solve this burden rather than, okay, we have this issue. You okay?
Yeah.
It's like, how can we do better? Not seeing these people as a problem, not seeing this as a problem to solve necessarily, but as a way to help. Of like, right, institutionalization is expensive. So our federal or state investment in these families is actually cheaper. So if you want to think about it from like a corporate standpoint, right, for all of the medical things, you're really getting a discount.
Yeah.
So feedback into these families that are doing all of this hard work, that are actually saving the state or the federal government money. And along the way, you are allowing these people that are struggling, whether it's the families or the individual, to be part of the community, to have access maybe to the arts, the outdoors, whatever. All of these things are beneficial for the individual for the families, for the communities, and just see it as a way of investing back into your people.
Yes.
And I think the way they're looking at it right now is very much from a corporate standpoint of, are these people worth serving? Of the things we need to cut, this seems like an easy thing to cut. Like, let these families just figure it out. But at the end of the day, all of us are paying taxes, right? So if you want to think about it from that perspective, and this is often how I think about it, I'm like, right, maybe I'll just stop paying taxes then. Because I have 3 kids that have special needs that aren't going to public school right now. And I've been paying into the public school system forever. And I have nieces and nephews, and I think it's a good thing. I think it's an excellent thing that everybody pays into things that people are using. So at what point, as a society, do we not think that it's beneficial to feed into one another? Like, I never had an issue with it. And I was a single person for a long time. I was making more money back then than I am now, for sure. And yeah, every once in a while it might be slightly irritating that you're like, oh yeah, you're taking a lot of taxes out of my check. But it's like, to what end? And I think if we can find a way that we can put a face with these things, and that the general public can see, oh, you know what? I actually do know more people with disabilities than I thought. And if they see disability for the way that it actually is, of, oh, I've got this uncle that was in the war and he got his leg blown off or whatever, and he was an amputee. I think sometimes they don't associate that the same way as they would with someone that has autism or dyslexia, things like that.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you think.
Yeah. Okay. So this is going to go back to my faith. It is. I went to parochial schools as a child. We were raised in the Catholic Church. And, all I know is that has been a stronghold, my faith in God, for as long as I can remember. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for being taught at a young age to believe in something, in someone far greater than myself, and to a greater purpose than my own personal life. So hearing you talk, I'm interested because my whole perspective is this. And that is when you're talking about, measuring the worth of a life of a human being. To me, at the end of the day, if I meet my maker, I'm going to hope and pray that what I have done has had the greatest impact on others that I could possibly have, a positive impact on others. Because to me, this whole life is about loving each other period.
Yeah.
So, getting to those that are different. They have probably the greatest gifts to offer others to change hearts, to change hardened hearts. And it's I know it's easy to say, but the more people's lives are touched by it, by loving someone, knowing someone, being touched by someone, having just even observing somebody in a community and allowing yourself for your heart to be touched, to recognize that maybe you're having a bad day, but this person, I mean, look at what they're overcoming. Far be it for me to complain. So I guess I come back to always that greater view of what would be the greatest thing to change most lives, most hearts, to soften most hearts toward loving each other. Because I've been teased in my lifetime about being too, kumbaya. And if it's rose-colored glasses that I've been wearing all my life, I choose to keep them on. Thank you very much. I just do. Because I would much prefer trying to see the best in people than always looking for the worst. And all I know is in the relatively short life we all have on this earth, I am so eternally grateful for the lessons and the things that I have been taught, and for the different human beings that have been put into my life, different from me, that I can learn from, gain from, grow from, love, and to be loved in return. I mean, to me, that's when you're really doing something great, is changing lives.
Yeah.
And you change lives and you change hearts. And that's, I know, I'm not a person who really enjoys talking about politics, because politics is just a reflection sometimes of what our culture, I think, is going through. And it's far more important, I think, on how we treat each other individually every single day. So I try not to get overly caught up too much in all that stuff, with all due respect, because it tends to cycle.
Yeah.
It just tends to cycle. So I kind of take the standpoint, and especially in our current culture, I don't know that we've ever been in a situation where people are being almost like encouraged to judge each other more harshly. And it's heartbreaking to me, because I think, oh my goodness, life is so short. Why not just, choose to love instead and let,
Well, I think that's why it's important to have these conversations, right?
Yeah.
Like those of us that are brave enough to put ourselves out there and just say, all right, listen, for all of our differences, for all of the things that we don't see the same, for our backgrounds or whatever, where's our baseline? What do we hold dear? What is the same? And I do think disability is another thing that brings us together, because
I totally agree.
Disability is colorblind.
Yeah.
For
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah, and it's a surprise.
Yeah.
It's always a surprise.
Right.
It's like, oh, hey, maybe you thought things were going to go this way.
Yep.
And then maybe you get an autism diagnosis, or maybe you get in an accident and all of a sudden you're disabled.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something else I wanted to touch on a little bit, because I have one of my siblings, perfectly healthy guy, played football in high school, goes to college, and his freshman year had a terrible car accident with a brainstem contusion, and his life trajectory changes forever. He was in a coma for months, and it was a long recovery for him. But that's such a great point. I mean, we all probably know somebody who was suddenly paralyzed by a fall off of a ladder, or a car accident, or blinded, or, so you're right. You can come into the world and not maybe have a congenital or a genetic or, some other type of, condition that, gives you unique and separate challenges other than just, getting through this life, as we all do. It can happen. It can happen at any time. And so that's another reason that I think you realize that those of us who just get up and walk across the room, be grateful. Be grateful that you and I can sit here and look at the clouds out in the sky and hear the birds singing. People that have hearing challenges or sight challenges can't. There's so many things like that. And to your point, this is why you think, why on earth should we be fussing over the things that make us a little bit different, when all in all, our experience as human beings is so much more similar. It's I know we can just keep beating that, but it does.
I think it's worth having the conversation. Like one of my other episodes, I have a friend of mine that she's an amputee. And we weren't making fun. We were just having a conversation, and we're having a conversation about her leg. And she has a hiking leg. And we're talking about it, and she's like, do you want me to go get it? And I was like, yeah, go get your leg. But I didn't say it in any way that was disrespectful, but I think we should be able to have conversations like that. And while we're having conversations about that, then maybe we will have larger conversations about accessibility. Like she goes all over the place and does accessible travel. And if we don't have those conversations, we don't know what's out there. And why not do things like that? Like why I was at a breakfast today. Actually, I was telling you about that. There was a whole conversation about wheelchair access and how it's so silly that it's at the end. Like, why isn't it all the way across? And I always thought that was strange, but maybe that's my autism. Because I look at things functionally like that, and I'm like, that doesn't seem to make good sense. Like, for a person that had a wheelchair, they're going to have to go all the way to the end and wait in line and go farther. Like, if you had 20 wheelchairs and then you just have this little bump ramp that, like, all 20 of them could just go boop right over. It just makes good sense.
You're right.
And, like, anyway, I think that's why we have people like me, people who have autism, that see the world differently, that we actually become innovators because we see the world differently.
I totally agree with that.
I think it's always been that way.
I think it has too.
Not just autism, everything, but, you know, for the military vets, for the amputees or whatever. Boom, you have a disability. You have something happen to you. Your world changes. You see the world differently. All of a sudden, by default, you get real curious, real inventive. And we need to be putting these
problem
people,
solvers.
Put these people in those positions. Like we need to see more of those people in political office, for example. Like, it just never made good sense to me that we have people sitting in a lot of places, whether they are on boards or in nonprofits, what have you. It doesn't matter. But they have not actually had the lived experience. If there's an organization that deals with a lot of people that use wheelchairs, I think it makes good sense for the person running that organization to have a wheelchair. But I think that's just logic. And I find it fascinating that maybe we're going closer to that. But historically, we've not necessarily done that. And that's why you have so many people with disabilities that struggle finding jobs and whatnot.
I know.
And
that's so true. And transportation has always been. I know. And again, thank goodness we're at least to a state where public transportation has made modifications to their systems, and it's getting better. But you're right. It's at a snail's pace, and I think you're right that people who have the lived experience, it would be lovely to have them at the table so that they can be giving their input on what might make a difference or what might benefit. And not only that, but remember, I'm trying to think of ABA. The wonderful ABA. I can't really think of a child that wouldn't benefit from some of the, aspects of applied behavioral analysis. They don't have to be on the autism spectrum to benefit from that. So a lot of times I felt like I experienced some of that within the classroom that was life skills from our sons. They were on that all the way through school. But oftentimes you'd hear teachers come into this life skills room and say, I'm going to implement that and take that out to my second grade class because this is wonderful. And so it no longer is necessarily just a special adjustment for that population, but you find that this is actually beneficial for, many age groups and for emerging little minds. And you know what I mean? So I'm sure it's the same thing for as we get older, it's, you find that you can take whatever things you've learned from one group and apply it to another. So it doesn't have to be doing special favors for a particular group of people. Like you're talking about ramps. I think I love ramps. I walk up them and I don't, you know what I mean? If there's no one that needs it more than me, I'm like...
Well, baby strollers.
Right?
I mean,
Exactly.
everyone at some point, unless you're just that type of dude that's like, I'm never going to touch a diaper. I'm not going to push the stroller, which I think there are fewer of those.
Yeah.
Everybody is going to touch a stroller at some point.
Yeah,
Most
people have
likely.
children, right?
Most likely. Strollers, wheelchairs.
Well, gosh, a lot
USPS even has
like
little
something
carts.
they carry, right? And a lot of in the urban areas, a lot of people have their mobile grocery carts.
Yeah.
And well, yeah.
But I think, all of it bounces back to community, really. And I think we're starting to see a resurgence of that, which is great.
I do too.
I hate
think
that
it's
so
really
much
great.
bad has happened that has provoked that. But I think it's necessary because we have to care about our communities, to care about things like that. And then we need the manpower. So let's say, maybe you want to put a fence around the children's park. And there's all this bureaucracy of, it's going to cost this amount of money. Rather than, okay, how about 50 people come down in one day, have this other business donate some resources, and we will just put it in.
Yeah.
But that's where the problem solving comes in.
Yeah, interesting. When we were living where we raised our children, there was not an accessible playground.
Mm-hmm.
And I had become familiar with a group out of Ithaca, New York, that did community-built playgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
And you could hire them to come into your community and educate your community on building its own playground. And that's what we ended up doing. It just began with donations from the local businesses, maybe a lumber yard.
Mm-hmm.
Then we got the schools involved, and the schools named it, and the young children, and then the families built it was all volunteer. The whole thing was built. It was supervised by this group out of New York, and there's several of them, around
Mm-hmm.
the city and state. But that was a very, very powerful experience because the entire community came together, and it wasn't just building a playground just for those children that had disabilities.
Yeah, yeah.
It improved all children's accessibilities, and then children, their classmates, they could go to the same playground if people were differently abled. Siblings could play at the same playground, so that their loved one that couldn't hold themselves up, that needed a little support in the swing, had that. So you're right. I do. I love that about the community, and you're right. It's unfortunate we've had to go through some tough things to get that, but every community is unique, across the country, and it doesn't have necessarily anything to do sometimes with our ethnic or religious or our political views. It's just that it's made up of human beings, and human beings are unique. So with every community, you have a unique environment, and it's lovely to engage that environment, and those people usually know what's going to work best for their community.
Speaking of community, I was just thinking of something here that is slightly controversial. Okay. I don't see it as controversial, but I really love the Hispanic community. I love how they really come together. I love how they really invest in their elders and in their young, and you can really see it. And I personally believe we could take some notes from that. And instead of some of the things that are going on right now, taking notes from some of these people and really incorporating them into some of these types of things, because these are the people who are the roofers, who do the fencing, who do the drywall, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, just saying.
And a stellar work ethic. I mean, and don't get me wrong, and there's all kinds of people that can have a good work ethic. You're if you're raised that way, you're just innately wired that way, that matters to you, or that your culture, reveals that's an important, aspect of society. But I know exactly what you're talking about, and
I know you know what I'm talking about because you've got a mixed family.
We do. And we have where our sons are currently living. I got to give a plug to Daymar. I do.
Oh yeah, let's talk about Daymar.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I do. Well, affordable housing a problem, and so when my husband and I were both having some health issues and realized that maybe the time to think about making a transition was sooner than we had originally thought, that Daymar has built this, it's called the Village of Daymar. It's open to the greater, public. There are individuals who live there with their family members. There's been staff members that live there. Our two sons live there, and we lived there for the first year and a half, part-time, just to help with the transition, get them integrated into their community. But it's tremendous. It has been life-changing for our entire family. We bebop down there. The boys' sisters drop in and the boys get to play with their nephews, and they go out to their volunteer jobs and out in the community every day, and we come over there. So it's wonderful. It's been an amazing. So to any of all the families out there, when you have little ones, just never give up hope. You can't see the future, but it's just have hope. Hang on to that, because we never dreamt that our sons could be. And here's another funny part, is that you can't help it when you love your child. I never wanted to think I was a helicopter mother. I just didn't want to think that of myself. Sure. I think I was. And part of it was I didn't want anybody to get hurt, right? I didn't want to, maybe I minced my one son's food too much because I didn't want him to choke, or never took my hands off of this one because he would dart off. But my point is, you think there's no way I cannot be there 24/7. Well, life has a way of showing you that, that's going to happen because, here's this condition or here's this illness or whatever, and you can't be there. And then you start to recognize that it is possible. And the amazing people who support our sons every day, they love our boys, and I know they're not boys, but they're always going to be our boys. Yeah. And we can see in not just their eyes, but the way they look at them, the way they interact with them, that they have loved in return. And it is beautiful. And what's so beautiful about it, it's impacted all of them. Like, everybody's been touched by it. Everyone gets changed by it. And within that, that community, everybody lifts each other up. And it's wonderful. It really is. It's been nothing is perfect. We talked about that too. I mean, life at home with mom and dad wasn't perfect, but it's a beautiful thing, and we take ownership in helping to support that community, right? The community of people, and be engaged in that community, and get to know all their neighbors, and engage with their neighbors, and it's a wonderful thing, and we're extraordinarily grateful.
Well, yeah, I really think community is at the heart of a lot of things. I had a friend of mine, I don't know if I told you this, but there was a friend of mine that passed away, and it was pretty recently. He was getting ready to go into hospice, and then turns out he didn't make it to hospice.
Oh, God.
But
So sorry.
That's okay. It's just interesting how people are, especially in different areas of the world. So this friend of mine, he's from the Netherlands. And I didn't have a ton of time to spend with him because I actually became friends with him through another one of my friends who I'd known longer. And it's interesting how people affect your life. And I was just telling my friend the other day, I said, I don't think that he's aware of how much he affected my life in such a short time. But the point of it is this. What we do and how we interact with our community, it matters. And I want to see more of that. I think there's too much right now, and for too long, has been money, money, money. How do we make the most money? How do we buy up the most property? And all this sort of thing that at the end of the day, you can't take it with you. And I'm not discouraging people from making money, but I think sometimes things happen in your life where it really puts things in perspective. And it's like you said, what work do you want to do? What do you want to be known for? And what I want to be known for is like helping my community. I want to be one of those people. And I want people to have a good quality of life. And if I can be involved in organizations or contribute to organizations that do that, like you're talking about with Daymar, what a wonderful legacy.
Well, and to be acknowledged. I'm just for a second going back to the IEP. In those years, when they would talk about, I was just never about maybe I should have been more, but never about the formal school education. It was more about those opportunities of getting out in the community, doing things with the greater community. Because I said, just because they're different, they have just as much to offer this world. Yeah. It may look a little different, but it's just as important. And I believe firmly that every soul walking this earth has something to give, has something to offer in some way to better our world. I just do. I believe that. And everyone deserves the right and the opportunity to be able to share that gift. So if some of us are blessed with, the gift of having conversations, of generating conversations, you're sharing that gift, you're using it. And that's the other thing, just not keeping our gifts to ourselves, giving back, whether it's financial, whether we've been blessed financially, or compassion, if that's your key, that's the thing that moves you to, as long as we all give back of the gifts we've been given because we didn't earn them. I mean, maybe some of us, we worked hard at our skill set, maybe through school or an athletic or a technique or something. That's not taking anything away from that, but to acknowledge the innate gift that you are given, to have the opportunity to do that. Because not everyone has the opportunity to hone their gifts in a particular way. So I just do. I feel like we all have a responsibility to give back to our communities in whatever way you can. And, everybody has something to give. So, our sons who can't, care for themselves, who can't speak, who can't, they have something to give. Everyone has something to give. The blink of an infant, the eye contact when they maybe can't even really see mom or dad's face clearly, has a profound impact on that person gazing into that child's eyes. That's powerful. And nothing's being said. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, there's just so much opportunity to gain respect for each other in this life, and honoring the fact that we all have gifts to give, and everyone should be given that opportunity to do that. So I'm with you. And I love the whole community because, communities there's so many of them. Our individual families are, kind of micro communities, and we should all be there for each other.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, I actually think that's a really good way to wrap this up, probably, is with community. But as I ask everyone, if there's one thing, as people are listening to this podcast today, and I know we talked about a lot of things, if there's one thing that you want people to take away from this podcast about you, that they remember about Mary Pat, that they think, oh, Mary Pat was this, or Mary Pat believes that, what would that be for you? What do you want them to walk away from this with, remembering about you?
About me? Well, I don't think I'd want it to be about me, per se, but the power of love, the power of loving a human being well.
I think that's a good one. Well, thank you very much for coming on, and I hope you come back, because I think this was a really helpful conversation, and I know there's more in there. Thanks, everybody, for coming. We'll see you next time.
We are at a pivotal point in American history. We do not have the luxury to remain silent. Programs are disappearing every day. We hope that this podcast raises awareness and sparks a sense of advocacy in you. We all can make a difference. The important thing is to start. See you next time.